Article 1, Section 16, Neville Mansion, 3 years before Election Day. Try as he might, Jerry Neville couldn't recall any consistently good advice about his love life that he had gotten from a human being. Bad advice came from them thick and fast. It started when he asked his mother about how to make his first junior high school boy-girl dance a success. "Just be yourself," she answered. He was shocked when her advice flopped. His mother, Dr. Hutchinson Neville, was a tenured professor of classics. Why wasn't she smart enough to realize that none of the girls in his school were interested in talking about math, computers, or stocks? Instead of talking, flirting, or dancing, they rolled their eyes at him and walked away. Ultimately, just being himself meant that Neville continued to do what he'd always done, so he continued to get what he'd always gotten, and be what he'd always been. When it came time to ask for an actual date, another piece of advice of hers was to try to be friends first, and to be a good listener. In the years that Neville followed that advice, he wound up listening in agony as the pretty girls he wanted to date told him their tales of woe about their dates with far more attractive guys. Another pearl of wisdom was to be persistent. Since Neville was one of the uncool kids, the cool kids always described his words and actions negatively. If he were cool, he would have been called determined rather than creepy. It gradually dawned on Neville that rather than asking women for advice about getting a girlfriend, he should probably ask men who succeeded with women. Perhaps the women who advised him meant well, but they didn't seem to realize just what it was that attracted them to the men they liked. Neville's social circle in college featured a young man whose conspicuous success with women was unusual for a computer science major. An offhand comment that Neville's uncle had once made meant that Neville was simply desperate to discover the guy's secret before graduation. His uncle had said, "Take advantage of these years, Jerry. You'll never again have such a selection of girls your own age to pick from." As Neville's freshman year wore on, he realized that amateur advice from his buddy was not cutting it. He might have more success in his quest to harness Cupid's power if he hired a professional dating coach. The coach's real name was Nathan Wood. Using the pseudonym Invictus, Wood ran a profitable website and forum to teach aspiring pickup artists how to meet and seduce women. Shy men in their thousands bought his advice books in their quest for love. Instead of buying the book or taking Invictus's online tutorials, Neville used the money he had earned during college to fly Invictus to Boston to coach him one-on-one. During their time together, Invictus took Neville to social events and watched Neville's attempt to interact with women. He gave him various pointers and advised him to avoid the blunders typically made by the average frustrated chump. These were common male behaviors that would kill a woman's attraction. The results of Invictus's advice were mixed. He got a couple of dates in college and even had a brief relationship with a woman whom he almost found attractive. While Neville was pleased to have blemished his previously unblemished record of failure with women, it was far from satisfactory. Invictus's advice was not bad, quite the contrary. The problem was that the advice was geared to the average frustrated chump. It recommended the kind of approach that would work for a fairly large number of men on a fairly large number of women. It was a one-size-fits-some, hit-or-miss proposition. The trick was to interact with enough women to find the ones who would respond to the techniques. It was a numbers game. Neville's success in business changed everything. The one-time outsider became an insider as his wealth and status increased. With it, he attracted the attention of women. Now that women frequently approached him, he never could shake the feeling that these women's motives were more mercenary than romantic, that their genuine love would be for his wealth rather than for him. It was at this time that Neville designed Wingman, a machine learning algorithm that would coach Neville on how to act so he could develop a woman's love for him. Its advice was completely different from what was offered by human beings. Wingman realized that Neville could colloquially be described as an average frustrated chump, in the sense that his poor results with women weren't unusual. But Wingman realized that it was far more productive to think of Neville as an individual. He was a particular frustrated chump. He was a man of particular qualities, strengths, and weaknesses. Similarly, each woman he would pursue would also be an individual. The ability to deliver charming repartees on the fly was never one of Neville's strengths, but Invictus made it look like child's play. Each woman he approached responded differently, but Invictus adjusted his technique to the situation. When Neville had attempted to do the same, he was very soon out of his depth. Wingman, on the other hand, had access to so much data on each woman that Neville interacted with that it knew his targets better than any of the women knew themselves. It knew them so well that it could predict their moves and countermoves. Wingman, consequently, was the only one whom Neville trusted for advice about his love life. First, Wingman advised him on how to phrase his emails and texts to get and keep Meghan's interest to get her on their first date. Their second date would be in Los Angeles, Meghan's territory. Neville would not be able to use his dominance at work to his advantage, nor would he be able to hide behind a computer screen. He would be out there alone, exposed to the risk of rejection. Just to be sure that Wingman's advice was tuned properly, Neville had the algorithm turn on the mic on Meghan's cell phone in the weeks before that critical second date. It would record some of her in-person conversations to calculate how she would normally respond in conversation. This would help Wingman in predicting the course of a conversation so that it could clearly outline the best strategy for Neville. All Neville had to do was remember the advice. Memorization was not a problem for Neville. If Neville managed to get Meghan into bed, he would be totally exposed to Meghan's scrutiny. Wingman armed Neville with a small arsenal of physical moves calculated to get Meghan turned on. It suggested ways to cycle through those moves to figure out which ones she would want the most. Even still, techniques for use in bed were not nearly as important as the techniques that got her to that bed. It was for this purpose that Neville had used the bulk of his time with Wingman. As he worked with the numbers in the computer code that was Wingman's output, it was easy for Neville to imagine his interaction with the machine as one of his conversations with Invictus. "How do I seduce her?" "Jerry, I thought you wanted her to fall in love with you." "I do." "Then you must be careful to ask me the right questions, Jerry. You remember what happened at your first meeting with Meghan? You waited too long to ask me what you should wear, didn't you?" "Yes." "How did that work out for you?" "Poorly. I had to send an employee to run out and buy a suit from the nearest store." "Now do you see the importance of asking me the right questions?" "Yes." "If you just want to get her into your bed, then just tell me. I'll show you how. She'll soon be in your bed, and just as soon out of your life. Is that what you want?" "No." "What do you want?" "Her genuine love."
"So, you want to seduce her in a way that makes her fall in love with you?"
"Yes."
"That's a different question than the one you first asked me now, isn't it?"
"I guess so."
Genuine love. That's what you want. Your whole life, that's what you've always wanted. Am I correct?
"Yes."
It's what you've always wanted more than anything in the world.
"Yes. Can you help me?"
I can help you.
"What do I do?"
Do you realize what you're up against?
"No."
Jerry, you're competing with her past.
"What do you mean?"
In the past, she's mostly dated athletes. Tall, muscular men with great physical prowess. I don't think you need to look in the mirror to know how well you stack up against that, do you, Jerry?
"Can I start working out?"
Don't make me laugh. It'll take you 6 months to build enough muscle for her to even notice. By then, some other guy will replace you in her affections.
"What do I do, then?"
Your problem, Jerry, is that for your whole life, you've bulldozed every difficulty in front of you using your talent. And here's a situation in which you don't have much talent.
"What do I do?"
You have to play the game differently than your competitors.
"How?"
You're going to have to do something she's never imagined would ever happen to her.
"What's that?"
She's a very beautiful woman, Jerry. What do you think has never happened to her?
I don't know.
Every man that's ever seduced her has done so by clearing away the obstacles to her consent. When those obstacles were gone, they got what they wanted.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Yes, but there are other ways.
Do you mean?
No, I mean you could play the game backwards. I don't think anybody's ever played the game backwards with her before.
And that will make her fall in love with me?
That will make her fall in love with you.
Will you tell me how to do that?
I will, Jerry. But you'll have to ask me nicely.
Article 1, Section 17. Suburban Home, 3 years before Election Day. Arnold Nguyen did his best to hear himself think. The breakfast table was never a quiet time in the Nguyen household. This morning was no exception. 2 pairs of twins loudly enforced their claims to kitchen table real estate and to priority in pouring themselves bowls of cereal. Milk and sugary flakes littered the table and floor, the result of a tugging match between the younger set of twins. One more thing for Arnold to clean up after Felicia dropped them off at elementary school.
"I've got to get going,"
Felicia said as she reached the kitchen, briefcase in hand, and her auburn hair wet from the shower. Arnold walked over to her. "You look great today, babe," he said, embracing her.
"Thanks. I've got the Orson account to worry about, but I'll get these monsters out of your hair,"
she said, and planted a kiss on his lips. With that, Felicia issued an order, and the 4 kids lined up at the door. Arnold wondered how she always managed that trick. Arnold gave the kitchen his customary 5-minute once-over and headed to the basement. He rubbed his hands together as he sat down. He waited as the big desktop computer, with its array of screens lined up across the desk, hummed to life. Arnold Nguyen never expected to have a career as an online journalist. The World Wide Web had not yet become a phenomenon until several years after he graduated college. Politics didn't even interest him until his junior year. Nguyen arrived in college in the early 1990s, during the first wave of political correctness. For him, it was somewhat of a shock. At first, Professor Basel, his history professor, seemed like a liberating, less stodgy substitute for his parents. But rather than actually teaching Western Civilization 1, he would use class time to denounce former President Reagan in the most hyperbolic and lurid terms. He would also denounce as a hate-monger Dmitry Ivanov, the Russian immigrant radio host whose nationally syndicated talk show was rapidly becoming the most listened-to program in the country. Nguyen believed what his professor was saying. He had grown up with a vague admiration for Ronald Reagan and with the residual patriotism that still permeated the Midwest in the 1980s. But this professor, who spoke so critically of Reagan and America, was highly educated, articulate, and charismatic. Nguyen felt as though he was finally hearing the counterintuitive truth that had been hidden from him his whole life. That feeling remained with him until a fellow student dared to raise his hand to defend the radio host. "Have you ever listened to Ivanov? He's not a hate-monger," the student said. "I don't need to listen to his screeds to know that racist conspiracy theories are wrong," the professor shot back without actually answering the student's question. Now Nguyen was intrigued. Were there really racist conspiracy theories being broadcast to the whole nation? Nguyen decided to hear the original source for himself, rather than trusting either the professor or his classmate. The next day at noon, he tuned into the Yvonne Loves America show, with the plan of listening to the first hour. 1 hour quickly became 3. Listening to one show became listening to a week's worth. Instead of the foam-flecked hate-monger that he was expecting, Ivanov loved America as only an immigrant from a poor totalitarian state could. He hated communism with the passion of somebody who had suffered under it. Soon, Nguyen realized that he had been taken in by Professor Basel's charm and the nodding agreement of his fellow students. Once he recognized that he had been led into believing lies, Nguyen began to wonder how much more of what Professor Basel had said, when he should have been teaching, was also untrue. From then on, Nguyen dedicated himself to separating truth from lies. With his computer on, Nguyen turned his attention to emptying his bulging email inbox, a chore he had neglected for the previous week. An email grabbed his attention. "Arnold, I've got great undercover videos," said the subject line. It was from an unfamiliar address at Harwood University. It had been sitting in his inbox for several days. Nguyen wondered how he had missed it.
Even among the hundreds of items in his inbox, he wouldn't normally have passed over an email that promised his favorite kind of content. Undercover journalism was not just a source of pleasant memories, it often brought traffic to his site. Frequently, those who contacted him with their secret sleuthing had disappointed him with their actual results. Bad camera work, unclear audio, boring and obvious discoveries. The text of the email explained what he was about to see, and when he clicked to watch the attached video, he was not disappointed. Nguyen fired off a 7-word email. "What number can I call you at?" Article 1, Section 18, Sanger Center Offices, Exurbs of Indianapolis, 3 years before Election Day. Dr. Brianna Wan sat down at her desk and opened her email. The hum of the air conditioner and the soft tapping of keyboards from the front desk staff were the only sound she heard in her office at the Sanger Center. Other than the usual junk, there was only one unread message. It was from Jerry Neville. With a click of her mouse, she opened the message. From Jerry Neville. To Brianna Wan. Subject, Hall's Sting Videos. "What's the Sanger Center doing about this kid?" Jerry. From Brianna Wan to Jerry Neville. Subject, Ray, Hall's Sting Videos. "Nothing. He's not a threat. The media ignored the story." From Jerry Neville to Brianna Wan. Subject, Ray, Hall's Sting Videos. "Not a threat? If he was making an argument, he wouldn't be a threat. He's finding and telling stories. That makes him a threat." From Brianna Wan to Jerry Neville. Subject, Ray, Hall's Sting Videos. "What should I do then, Brianna?" From Jerry Neville to Brianna Wan. Subject, Ray, Hall's Sting Videos. "Don't worry your pretty little head about him. I'll handle it myself. In the meantime, read your Machiavelli. About threats, Machiavelli instructed his prince to prepare with every energy, because when foreseen, it is easy to remedy them. But if you wait until they approach, the medicine is no longer in time, because the malady has become incurable. For it happens in this, as the physicians say, it happens in hectic fever, that in the beginning of the malady, it is easy to cure, but difficult to detect. But in the course of time, not having been either detected or treated in the beginning, it becomes easy to detect, but difficult to cure." Article 1, Section 19, Wainwright's Gym, 3 years before Election Day. Jonathan Hall led Kevin Judd to the squat rack and placed his hand on the bar. "This is the squat rack," said Hall. "It is the place where you bend your knees. When you genuflect in the squat rack, you will find the answers that you seek." "How?" Kevin asked. His attention was fixed firmly on Hall. He paid no attention to the girls posing in the mirrors or the grunting of the beefy men pumping iron. "Because it's here that you will learn to separate truth from lies." "I still don't get it." "Today you're going to force your body to do something it's never done before. We're going to load this bar up to your body weight, and you'll squat the bar 20 times. Kevin gulped. "When you do that, you're telling your muscles, your bones, your heart, and your lungs to change. Your body doesn't want to change. It wants to stay comfortable. It's going to scream lies at you. This is too heavy. This is too hard. You're going to hurt yourself. Lies, all of them. Those lies will keep you weak. Not just your body, but your mind too. 20 times. When I get hurt, sometimes the messages your body is telling you are the truth. Sometimes you are going to get hurt. We're going to learn to tell the difference between the discomfort of change and the pain that warns of injury. That's how you discover that you're stronger than you think, that you're capable of more than you ever imagined, that you can make yourself great." Kevin nodded. "But how do I tell the difference between discomfort and a warning?" "The only way is to focus on the action of your body. Make every action perfect. Stay in control. When you do that, your mind will connect with your body, and you will know the truth." Kevin still looked unsure. 20, he muttered, shaking his head. "Remember that scene in Raven's Bane, in which the King of Hearts took away Raven's superpowers, and Raven had to fight him as an ordinary man? Remember how he used the last of his strength to choke out the king? What was it he said?" Kevin's eyes brightened. "I don't have my powers, but I do have this," he enthused, reciting the line from memory. "Okay then," said Hall. "Are you ready to pay the price?" "Yeah." Kevin gripped the bar tightly. He shouldered the weight and stepped back from the rack. He set his feet, took a deep breath, and bent his knees. When he hit bottom, he stood back up. He did it again, and then again. After the 7th repetition, he paused. "When you're sure you can make it, keep on going," Hall said. 5 more reps followed. "Don't scrunch up your face, Kevin. Keep a poker face. You'll feel better if you learn to look calm even when it hurts." Kevin nodded as the barbell buried itself into his back. "Whatever you're feeling, just experience it. Get to know it. It's your guest for the moment. Don't fight it." Another nod as sweat began pouring down Kevin's reddening face. Hall could see the determination in his eyes. After the 12th squat, Kevin stopped again. "Come on, you've done 12. I'm sure you could do 2 more." Despite the burning in his thighs, the strain in his back, the pressure in his chest, Kevin squatted 2 more times. He stopped again. "Just hold the weight, don't rack it," said Hall. "When you're ready, squat again." "The bar is crushing me. The only way out is through. Just a few more." Kevin squatted. After a brief pause, he squatted again. "If you want it badly enough, it will happen." Another squat. By now, Kevin's face was bright red. "You're almost there, Kevin." Another 2 squats. Both of them were done properly, but slowly. "Last one," Hall announced. I can't." "Yes, you can." Kevin just stood there. "Go home a winner. Don't put the bar down." Kevin stood with the bar. "Whenever you're—" Before Hall could get out the word ready, Kevin bent his knees and squatted one last time. He got up slowly, but he made it without any help. He racked the bar and sank to the floor, exhausted. Hall crouched down next to him. "You found the answers, didn't you?" "Yes," he said, nodding his head and wiping the sweat from his brow. "Then remember what you've learned." Hall stood up. He extended a hand to help Kevin to his feet.
This is Ari Mendelson. I hope you're enjoying Consent. I'd love it if you could show your appreciation for my years of hard work by hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. But why keep this adventure to ourselves? I wrote Kingmaker because I believe its message of keeping control of our own minds is one that America needs to hear. Young men especially will profit from learning the message that lies at the heart of these novels, that the straightest path to happiness is by improving yourself, one step at a time, rather than attempting to change others. So, share this audiobook far and wide across your favorite social platforms. See the description below for other ways for you to support my work. Thank you so much for your time and attention.